Oh, I tell you what, man, my evil plan of never cutting my hair again. I don't know if I'm going to hold out. I don't know if I'm going to make it. But anyway, this is what it looks like today. It is Thursday. It's Friday Eve. Makes the weekend seem closer. October 3rd. We are sitting at 8:22:36 in the morning. How are you doing? Well, it's fixing to get interesting across the country, especially in the plains. We'll talk about that here in a second. First, I forgot to put the satellite in motion. This is the last 3 or 4 hours, ending at about 7 o'clock this morning. And so you kind of see where the jet stream is, kind of right along the Canadian border, the northern states, and then taken off back into Canada around the Great Lakes. And so we're seeing some high cloudiness, mainly with that streaking from Oregon through Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, into Minnesota. A few high clouds here, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Wyoming, Nebraska, but very quiet across much of the country. A few clouds here in Arizona. That's about it. And then Mississippi, I don't know, maybe that's a shower there. We do see more tropical moisture or just rich Gulf moisture in the Gulf of Mexico. Very few of those showers making it into Florida, but pretty quiet for the most part. Here are the extremes across the country today, though. These are the hazards for today, and I double checked to make sure they were for today, and they are. So we're still excessive heat warnings along the Colorado River. So from near Las Vegas, but basically, western Arizona, back towards Phoenix, into Southern California, along the California coast, and then inland in the Central Valleys in California is a heat advisory. But be advised, it's going to be hot. Then you get up into Oregon, you start to see some wind issues, red flag warnings here for some places, and then Eastern Oregon, wind advisories here. You get into Montana, a little bit of Idaho, into North Dakota, a little bit of South Dakota. We have high wind watches in effect, so the wind's really going to be an issue. And we have freeze warnings too for northwestern North Dakota. So our cold air is, making its way across the northern states and ending the growing season as it goes. Fog again this morning. Tennessee, a little bit of North Carolina maybe. Certainly lots of Kentucky into West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. And river flooding still an issue for parts of the South and Mid-Atlantic. Did I get everything on here? It looks like it. Okay. Let's go to our weather spotlight. And yep, pumpkin size hail expected in Omaha. No, it's just that kind of season. It's not cornucopias, it's just buckets of pumpkins. It is that time of year. So I picked Omaha for a couple reasons. First of all, I live near Omaha, and so that's our local forecast office. And so some of my viewers are local here, and some of my friends from church or just friends that live here in Western Iowa. So this pertains to them mostly. But keep in mind, I do take requests. So if you'd like for me to highlight somewhere else, like your area, let me know in the comments, because I do take requests. But anyway, here's our forecast, Omaha area. And another reason why I picked Omaha is it's going to be quite dramatic by Saturday. So today, breezy. We have a weak cool front blowing through. Already we have wet north winds, northeast breezes here in western Iowa this morning. And so it's going to keep temperatures from getting too warm, 75 to 85. We're usually on the 75 side. Omaha, Lincoln, more on the 85 side. Tomorrow is going to be gorgeous as that cool air settles in, winds relax, just a beautiful day. And then Saturday is our very high fire danger. And Omaha is predicting a high in the low to mid 90s. And the record on Saturday is 95. The all-time record for October is 96. So getting close. And the GFS has it even hotter, which we'll show you here as we go through our forecast, because that's what we do. Meanwhile, let's take a look out at the tropics. And, we've been talking on the GFS that, will we see a tropical system form out here in the Gulf, which will become a tropical storm and or hurricane, perhaps moving towards Florida, because GFS did show that a few days ago in just one run, but there's been no model consistency with that. And if you were with us yesterday, you know that on this map, this yellow area was orange. So they've dropped the chance of development in the Gulf down below 40%. Meanwhile, Hurricane Kirk could be a major hurricane, but not bothering anyone out there in the middle of the Atlantic basin. And now we have Tropical Storm Leslie. So, and if we do get a named storm with an M, they retired Michael because Michael caused all that damage a few years ago. And so on the list now, I think 6 years ago. So the list gets recycled every 6 years. There's 6 lists. And next on the M on the list now, because they replaced Michael with Milton. So Milton will be next if we get to M, which I imagine we will. And we're at 30% chance of development now in the Gulf is what the National Hurricane Center is saying. So I'm not saying it won't happen because 30% chance, there is a chance. All right, let's take a look at the rest of the country. Today's surface map showing showers and storms along the Gulf Coast and then moving up into the Appalachians. So, we have rescue efforts still underway, mainly western North Carolina. Tennessee needs help too. Northern Georgia, parts of South Carolina, but hardest hit, I think, western North Carolina into eastern Tennessee. Anyway, a few showers would not be helpful, but it's in the forecast. Our cool front moving through western Iowa right now and moving through slowly the rest of Iowa during the day. Also Wisconsin, also Michigan. And a few showers possible around that. Not really. It's not going to happen. And a few showers for western Washington. Temperature anomalies for today. So with our cool front moving into the Midwest and upper Midwest, we're going to be right at average, give or take a degree or two, for much of the northern plains into Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, even Minnesota into Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan. Then it starts getting above average as you head further south, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and the Intermountain West back to the West Coast. I mean, that's why we have those excessive heat warnings and heat advisories for California and Arizona. And then pretty close to average temperatures from Florida, parts of the southeast into the mid-Atlantic, and just a slightly above average for the rest of the east. But that's going to be the trend all the way through the middle of the month. Above average temperatures and pretty dry for most of the country. That translates to these highs. And I found a map. These are the highs now across the whole country. So 107 Fresno. It should have stuck with the old map. That's just depressing. 105 Phoenix. We still have upper 90s, low to mid 90s. I'm sorry, for Texas into Oklahoma and even Kansas they do have some upper 90s there. Mostly near 80 for Iowa, or low 80s depending on where you are. 70s for the northern half of the state, and that translates into 60s even as you head further north towards the Canadian border. Lots of 70s Midwest down into Kentucky, 80s Tennessee, 80s for the southeast, and then back to 70s mid-Atlantic into Pennsylvania, some 60s thrown in for the northeast. Lows tomorrow. So where I live, it's going to be cooler because we have this cool front moving through now. Cool high pressure settling in, light winds overnight. So that'll help us get back into the 40s tonight. Yesterday morning, I forgot to mention, it was like 39 for a low where I live. So yeah, we're getting there. 40s tomorrow morning, western Iowa, although 50s southern half of Iowa. We'll see. I think some of these temperatures are a little bit overdone on the here too. We'll explain that. A lot of 40s across the west, even 30s elevation. And starting the day in the 80s, desert southwest, 70s to near 80 Texas, 70s southeast. And then as you head further north, 60s, 50s. All right, surface for tomorrow. Our cool front makes slow progress into the Midwest and Great Lakes with a slight chance of showers around that. Scattered storms, perhaps, for the southeast. Our Pacific Northwest system, that's a little bit more potent. So a little bit better chance of rain. Western Oregon, Western Washington, snow, perhaps. Washington Cascades, snow, perhaps. The mountains around Missoula and up towards Kalispell, the Mission Mountains there could get white with elevation, also down into Idaho. down towards Stanley. Also, Yellowstone with a chance for some snow or rain mixed with snow. But then, right there, eastern Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, we have a high fire danger. And that's going to be the biggest story, I think, on these maps as we get into the weekend, especially. Anomalies for tomorrow, quite the cool off for the Pacific Northwest. A good 12, 13 degrees below average for Portland, Eugene, respectively. But then you just get further inland and it's well above average for the Intermountain West, California, all through Nevada, Utah, up into Montana, and then spilling into the northern plains. Another patch of well above average temperatures from Texas, Oklahoma, into Missouri and Arkansas. Then back below average, probably with some moisture and some rain moving its way into Alabama and Florida. Highs for tomorrow, this is how those highs translate to actual temperatures. Mid-90s Oklahoma and 80s and 90s for Texas. Well above 100 desert Southwest into California, just brutal. 50s though for the Pacific Northwest, Willamette Valley, 57 for Portland, Oregon, but inland warmer along the Snake River. We see 80s, upper 80s to low 90s. So even 88 for Boise. 80s also into Montana, and then 70s across the northern plains into Iowa and Nebraska. 80s as you head south into the plains. Mid-Atlantic, 83 South Carolina, low 80s North Carolina, and then 70s Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and much of the Northeast. This is how dry it is for the next 2 days. This is our expected 48-hour rainfall, and Maine could see some rain, up to a half inch maybe. Same for you, Vermont and New Hampshire. A little bit of a patch of rain if this comes true for Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, again up to maybe a half inch here. But the greatest amounts will be western Washington, the Olympic Mountains, the Cascades especially. Could see an inch and a half liquid precipitation. Now, if it falls as snow, if it fell as all snow, that would be quite a bit of snow, but it might be a mixture. All right, for Saturday, we'll get into the weekend forecast. Just take a peek here on Saturday. I should have moved this map. I can still move it. Let me get back to this. I'm going to go back to our GFS model, and we'll show you the flip-flopping that it's doing on our tropical system. Mainly is the main thing we're watching here because everything else is pretty quiet. However, as we start this morning, you see the 540 line. I like to point that out. That's where the coolest air is. That, again, the demarcation normally between rain and snow. So just an indication that we're starting to get into some chilly air here, and it's dipping into North Dakota a little bit. Remember, we have those freeze warnings for northwestern North Dakota. And so there's that cold air barely making an appearance into the northern plains. And it's going to skirt along, the Canadian border as we're getting into, this is Friday morning. Here comes the rain in Washington. We do have tropical moisture or just Gulf moisture. So we could see scattered showers along the Texas Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and as far north as Georgia. Meanwhile, I wanted to show you Saturday. This is Saturday early morning. This low is really deepening here along the Canadian border, and we have high pressure to the east, and the pressure difference between the two is going to cause some very gusty southerly winds on Saturday. That's going to really elevate the temperatures. It's really, again, the gusty winds, and it's been dry. We've had very little rain in the last almost month. So the fire danger in this area is just going to be insanely high. So like I always say, if you smoke, keep your butts in the car. But seriously, just be careful with any outdoor burning has been banned for a while, even with breezy conditions as dry as it is. Meanwhile, Saturday, early morning, some rain down here in South Texas. We can see our low in Canada making slow eastward progress, this wind cranking across the central and northern plains into the Midwest. And eventually that's going to drive a cool front through and cool us off, but it's going to be very hot on Saturday. So that low skedaddles. We have, again, moisture in the Gulf we're seeing a low develop here, so maybe a tropical low, but it doesn't look to be tropical storm strength, much less hurricane strength. But bringing some tropical moisture into Florida, perhaps. So some heavier showers. If I hover up too, it's just off screen, but if I hover, it jumps the maps. So I apologize for that. Here we go, getting into Columbus Day. So it is that time of year. This is the 11th, and a pretty decent system moving at Oregon, Washington, and Northern California coasts. As that moves onshore, some brief heavy rainfall into Northern California, Southern Oregon, and Columbus Day kind of wet for the Pacific Northwest. Now this is also Canadian Thanksgiving, eh? And I grew up in Oregon right around here, and I have an uncle who lives up here in British Columbia. So we used to go for Canadian Thanksgiving every year. It was really fun. One year it snowed. It was great. Anyway, I digress. As we go through into mid-October, and again, we have a low down here, but it's not a low down. This is the lowdown on the lowdown here. It's just not a tropical system. It's just some tropical moisture at this point. We do see some snow on here for central Nevada. I don't know why my voice got so high there for a second. So midnight on the 12th, going into Saturday the 13th. We'll see if that comes true. And now I want you to watch the East Coast, because here's a piece of energy diving into like Maine with some cooler air and some scattered snow showers coming in here on the 15th. So again, we get this far out in the forecast, and it's, we're looking for model consistency, and obviously we haven't had that. But we could see a pattern change if this comes true. Remember, we were showing a snowstorm dropping into the Rockies on a previous run of the GFS on about the 15th. So now on the 17th, it's showing a system. Oh my gosh, it did it again. It's showing a system dropping down from the Pacific Northwest, but hanging out mainly in Montana and then heading back into Canada. So we'll keep an eye on all that. All right, Saturday. Let's go back to the Saturday surface. So as we give you the forecast for the weekend, our cool front now moving pretty much through the East Coast, so cooler here, into the mid-Atlantic, dry frontal passage. Some showers down along the Gulf Coast Saturday. Some showers possible Great Lakes, but dry and windy for the plains. And I'm really surprised they haven't drawn in a high fire danger here, because our anomalies for Saturday, remember wind too, so 30 degrees above average, Iowa through Omaha, through Hastings, Nebraska, northern Kansas. It's just going to be really hot and really windy, and it's been really dry. The GFS has Omaha at 100 degrees. Now, the Weather Service in Omaha is predicting a high of around 95 degrees. Local meteorologists this morning had the high at 93 degrees. Keeping in mind the record's 95, the all-time record for October is 96. So it's going to be really hot. Even if we don't hit 100, it's going to be a miserable day with the wind and the heat for places like Omaha, places like Kansas, much of Nebraska, even into South Dakota, although cooling off for the Dakotas, and that front will move through Iowa and cool things off by Sunday. Speaking of which, there it is. That cool front blows through, and instead of 30 degrees above average for Iowa and Nebraska, we're 8 to 10. So a good 20-degree cool-off, still above average, but better. Teens above average for West Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, all the way into the Midwest and Eastern Great Lakes. And well above average still for you in California. So I'm looking at most of the country here above average. In California, much above average on Sunday, but below average with that tropical moisture and the possibility of showers for the Florida Peninsula. Those highs look like this: 70s for Florida, mid-80s for the Southeast, and then back to near 80, North Carolina, Virginia, and then in the 70s as you head into the Northeast. But the Midwest, Ohio, mid-80s, Kentucky, mid-80s, Tennessee, mid-80s, low 90s, Arkansas, into Oklahoma, and then even warmer down in Texas. And then the desert Southwest still baking in the sun, 104 for Phoenix. 103 for Bakersfield, 97 for Reading. So that's a little better. So we're going to stay hot, it looks like, and that trend continues as we go from the 8th of October through the 12th. The western 2/3 of the country with a good chance of above average temperatures. Below average temperatures, a good bet for the Northeast into the Mid-Atlantic, into parts of the Midwest and parts of the Southeast. Precipitation-wise, pretty dry most of the country, especially Great Lakes. This doesn't mean it won't rain. It's below average rainfall. And above average for Florida, again, as we're watching tropical moisture, not necessarily a tropical storm or hurricane, but tropical moisture. And then for the West Coast, slightly above average chance of above average temperatures. So that's a look at your forecast as we go through the weekend. Big story, at least for me here in the plains, or actually Iowa, technically the Midwest. Nebraska would be the plains. Anyway, windy and warm, hot. We'll just call it hot. Windy and hot Saturday, and high fire danger. So watch out for that. All right. That's a look at your forecast through the weekend. I'm really encouraged. We picked up quite a few subs, even though the daily views have dropped because there's not anything super exciting going on in the weather to be expected. But we've picked up some more subs, and I just really appreciate each and every one of you. And remember, I take requests, so make your wishes known in the comments below. And if you have any constructive criticism or suggestions or encouragement, whatever it is, we'll always take comments and appreciate those. So have a great Friday Eve as we head into the weekend. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning right here on the Weather Mic.